All right, so let's continue. We have a couple more conversions to do. This one is having me go from yards to decimeters. So I'm going to think a little bit about that. All right, so yards to decimeters. Wait, I don't like that. I'm going to do a snip instead. Hold on. Let me get back. Okay. All right, so I don't want that. Let me go to where I could make a snip of that. Let me see. Full screen snip. All right. So I'm going to look at those conversions there at the top. So we're trying to get from yards to decimeters. So first I'm going to plan a little bit. So I need to get from yards into the metric system. So let me look at where I'm at. All right, so I can get from yards easily to feet, but I'm trying to get to decimeters. And this one is going to be a little weird because once I go to feet, I can get from feet to like meters, and then maybe from meters to decimeters. So let me think about it again. I want to go back to the snip. All right, so I'm trying to go from yards to decimeters. All right, I'm going to change my tune. I think I could do this one. I just noticed it. There was one that would take me from yards to meters, and then once I do that, I could go meters to decimeters, okay? All right, so there's multiple ways you could do it. So 1.0936. All right, 1.0936. Let me just jot that down. Am I in here? Yeah. So 1.0936, and that was yards, equals 1 meter. Okay, so I'm going to double check that I copied that right. 1.0936 yards equals 1 meter. Okay, and then once I do meters, I'll be able to go to from meters to decimeters. Okay, so I could start with my unit. Okay, so I'm starting with my 5,593 yards. I want yards to cancel, so I'm going to put them on the bottom. Okay, and I've got to put the 1.0936 yards. That gets me to meters. Now, once you get to meters, you could then use that idea dealing with the prefixes and just go from meters to decimeters, or you could use the fact that you know there are 10 decimeters in 1 meter. So you could do that, and then that means after you're done, you move to 10. So you could do, let me do the 5593 divided by the 1.0936. That would get me to 5,114.3, and I'd be, let's say 30. That would be meters, and I could just do those two and then say to myself, okay, and then meters, if I'm trying to go from meters to decimeters, when I look here, if I'm trying to go from meters to decimeters, I'm here at the middle and I need to go one place to the right. So you could do that. So you could then say I need to go one place to the right to get the 51,143. So it's 51,143 decimeters, right? Or you could think about 10 decimeters in 1 meter, and that would tell you after you divide to get the first one, you're going to multiply by 10. Okay? All right, now we got to do from kilometers to decimeters. So that's metric to metric. So we can just sit here, understand that the decimal is there, and we can think if we're trying to go from kilometers to decimeters, then I have to go from kilometers to hectometer. Oops, it's the wrong way. Wrong way. Kilometer to hectometer to decameter to the base unit, and then to decimeter, and that would get me to here. Okay, so that would be 72 with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 zeros. So that'd be 72 million decimeters. Okay. All right, and then, sometimes people like to use the unit analysis. When I'm using the unit analysis on this, I'm thinking 7,200 kilometers, 1 kilometer is 1,000 meters because of the meaning of kilo. But I want meters out of there, and I know 1 meter is the same as 10 decimeters. And so then I could take that 7,200 and multiply it by 1,000 and by another 10, and I would get the same thing, the 72 million decimeters. Okay. All right, let's go ahead and move on. I want to look at the temperature ones here. You'll have the formulas on the formula sheet. So if I'm starting with a Celsius temperature, then this would be the formula I would want to use. Because then to get the F, all I got to do is put in 30 for C. Because 30 is degrees C, so it's going to go here where the C was, and that makes it just a calculator problem. But if I'm going to start with Fahrenheit, then use the other formula, so again, it's just a calculator problem, and put the 104 in there, and then just use your calculator to make your conversions. Okay. All right, I'm going to go back to the sheet and now make a screenshot of those word problems and at least get those set up for you. Okay. So let me do a snip of that, and we'll work on setting those up and thinking through them. All right. So as we work on number 17, we got to think about what we're trying to do. So you just do a quick read. You got the jacuzzi, how much water, how much it weighs, 2 people are in it, and we want to know how much the total weight would be, including the people, the tub, and the water. Okay. So we know the jacuzzi itself is 50 pounds. And got a 140 pound and 190 pound person. So I got that much. Okay, so that's the people and the tub, but I need the water. So that's where I have to worry about this 770 gallons of water. I'm assuming fresh water. So I'm going to look and see how I can get how much 170 gallons of water would weigh. So I'm going to go to my conversion fact sheet. So weight. Excuse me. So I only see this one fact that involves the weight of the water. So I'm going to need to use it to get pounds, but that means instead of gallons, I'm going to need cubic feet. So let me see. Is there something that would help me get from gallons to cubic feet? Yep, right there. Cubic feet, that cubic foot really is 1 feet cubed. So I'm going to use these two, okay? So I'm going to go from gallons to cubic feet, and then from there I can get the weight. All right, so that's my plan, okay? So 7.48 gallons. So I'm going to take the 170 now, which is gallons, and I can multiply it by a unit fraction, but I need gallons on the bottom. So we know 7.48 gallons is 1 cubic foot. So that gets us to cubic feet. And then we were told, and I'm assuming fresh water here, then we were told a fact that would tell us how much 1 cubic foot weighed. So 1 cubic foot weighed, and let me double check that, 62.1 cubic foot weighs 62.5 pounds. So 62.5 pounds. Okay, so to get from gallons to how many pounds, I'm going to take 170 divided by 7.48 times the 62.5. So I'm going to take the 170 and the 62.5 should be multiplied, but then dividing by the 7.48. All right, so that's a lot. And then add that to what that turned out to be, which was 1,400, if I round to the nearest pound, 1,420 pounds just for that, and then you need to add all of that up. Okay. All right, now this problem, we did one kind of similar to it. So we know a gallon of paint will cover 400 square feet, but her measurement for her space was in square inches. So the plan will be to go from square inches to square feet, and then we'll be able to get the number of gallons, okay? Because this basically is a conversion fact that says 1 gallon is going to cover 400 square feet. So it's like a built-in conversion fact. So I'm going to start with the 274,315 square inches, but what I want to do is get rid of the square inches and get square feet. So I have to look for that. So I'm going to come over here. It's area, so it'll be on the front page. And right there we have that 1 square foot is the same as 144 square inches. So I'm going to go, and I know that 1 square foot is the same as 144 square inches, which gets me to feet squared. And then what I can do is multiply that by a unit fraction that uses this, okay, which would mean I'd want the 400 square feet on the bottom and the 1 gallon on top. So basically I'm going to take this 274,315 and I'm going to be dividing it by that and also by that 400. So I need to do that. So make sure you practice typing it in and that you're understanding the idea. All right, so it turns out to be 4.762413194, but it says, oh gosh, remember, we cannot, that should be by. All right, so remember that we need to think about, got to cover the whole space. So if it's 4.76, it's not just because I'm rounding to 5 because of that being a 7, but it would need to be 5 gallons there if I'm going to have enough to cover it. Now, the comment I want to make though is if that had turned out to be, let's say it turned out to be 4.13 or something like that, you would still need 5 gallons of paint or you wouldn't be able to cover the whole space. So it's not normal rounding rules. It's if I only bought 4 gallons, that's what this number would round to, but then I wouldn't have enough paint to paint the room, so I'd still need to say 5 gallons, okay? All right, so that's a little tricky part. All right, here we're trying to get from cups of water to quarts of water. So on the conversion fact sheet, I'll actually have added a couple that get cups in there. So let's find the capacity area. All right, so on that, I'm going to add in the common thing about cups. 1 cup equals 8 fluid ounces will be on there, and I'll also have the fact that 1 pint equals 2 cups. All right, so you'll have those available. So if you have one like this, we're trying to go from cups to quarts. So 42 cups, okay. And then if I didn't know there were 4 cups in a quart, what I could do is get from cups, there's 2 cups in 1 pint, and then there's 2 pints in 1 quart. So I could do that. And so then I would take 42 divided by 4, and that would get me to quarts. So that would be 10.5 quarts. Okay. All right, so what if we were doubling that recipe? Well, then I would need double that. I would need 21 quarts. All right, one more I wanted to set up is this guy. All right, so this one, we're starting with a guy that's driving currently at 132 kilometers in 1 hour. And our goal is get it to miles per hour. So the time unit is already what we want. So our goal is miles over hours. We have the goal on the bottom already, so we won't have to do a conversion there, but I'm going to need to do something that gets rid of kilometers. So I'm going to go to my fact sheet. It's a length unit, so I'm going to go to the front page, and I'm going to look for something that gets me from kilometers to miles. Kilometers to miles. So it's not here, that's staying within the metric. It's going to be somewhere in here. Oh, and there's two. There's this one or this one. I like that one because of the 1.61 being easier to type in, but either one of them could have been used. So I'm trying to convert, and I know 1.61 kilometers. 1.61 kilometers is the same as 1 mile. So that tells me that I need to divide. Then I'll have the goal unit I want on top. And all I got to do is take the 113 divided by 1.61, and that will turn out to be nearest tenth, it said. So that'll turn out to be about 70.2 miles per hour. Sometimes we abbreviate that MPH, or you could think miles per hour that way.